Thomas DeSimone, a notorious figure in the American underworld, was a key associate of New York City's infamous Lufthansa crime family. Born on June 6, 1946, in New York City, DeSimone grew up in a family that was no stranger to organized crime. His two brothers, Robert and Anthony, were linked to the Gambino crime family, with Anthony ultimately meeting a violent end at the hands of mobster Thomas Agro in 1979. His sister Phyllis became the mistress of renowned mobster James Burke when she was just 16, further entangling the DeSimone family in the web of New York's criminal underworld. DeSimone's brother-in-law, Joseph the Barber Spione, met a grim fate as well, allegedly killed for refusing to take part in a plot against DeSimone. DeSimone's criminal career is one marked by audacity and brutality. He is widely believed to have played a critical role in two of the most infamous heists in U.S. history, the Air France robbery and the Lufthansa Heist, but his violent tendencies extended far beyond theft. In 1970, DeSimone committed one of his most infamous murders, killing William "Billy Bats" Bentvena, a member of the Gambino crime family. This act, immortalized in Martin Scorsese's 1990 film Goodfellas, contributed to his legacy as a ruthless enforcer. Joe Pesci's portrayal of Tommy DeVito, a character based on DeSimone, earned widespread acclaim and highlighted the unpredictable volatility for which DeSimone was feared. Despite his high-profile crimes, DeSimone's life ended in mystery. He disappeared without a trace in 1979, and while many believe he was murdered as part of an underworld reprisal, his body was never found. His story, along with his role in the Lufthansa Heist, was chronicled in Wise Guy, the best-selling book by Nicholas Pileggi, which later served as the foundation for Goodfellas. DeSimone's life, marked by violence, betrayal, and mystery, remains a haunting tale of the brutal realities of organized crime. In 1965, at just 19 years old, Thomas DeSimone was introduced to Paul Vario, a powerful caporegime in the notorious Lucchese crime family. This introduction marked the beginning of DeSimone's deep entrenchment in the world of organized crime. Henry Hill, a trusted associate of Vario and a key figure in the family's network, later reflected on his first encounter with DeSimone. He described him as a skinny kid wearing a wise guy suit with a pencil-thin mustache. A sharp, almost theatrical image of a young man eager to make his mark in the underworld. Under the tutelage of Vario, as well as seasoned criminals like Jimmy Burke and Henry Hill, DeSimone quickly learned the ropes of the trade. His criminal activities ranged from truck hijackings and fencing stolen goods to more sinister pursuits like extortion, fraud, and even murder. DeSimone's method of carrying his weapon became legendary among his peers. Rather than brandishing it openly, he concealed his gun in a brown paper bag, giving the appearance of someone casually carrying lunch. Walking down the street, he looked like he was bringing you a sandwich instead of a .38, Hill quipped, illustrating DeSimone's unnervingly casual approach to violence. By the mid-1960s, DeSimone's reputation had grown, and so had his ambitions. One of his most infamous heists was tied to Air France's currency shipments. At the time, Air France was responsible for transporting large sums of American currency exchanged in Southeast Asia back to the U.S. The cash, typically packed in linen bags containing up to $60,000 each, was stored at John F. Kennedy International Airport in a cement block strongroom guarded by private security. Every week, up to $1 million passed through the terminal, making it a prime target for ambitious criminals like DeSimone. On April 7, 1967, DeSimone's chance for a major score arrived. Robert McMahon, an Air France employee with inside knowledge of the system, informed Jimmy Burke, Henry Hill, and DeSimone about an upcoming shipment of between $400,000 and $700,000 in cash. McMahon advised them that the optimal moment for the heist would be just before midnight, during the security guard's scheduled meal break. With this crucial information, DeSimone and his crew orchestrated a daring robbery that would cement their status as key players in the world of organized crime. This pivotal heist, like many of DeSimone's exploits, showcased his cunning, audacity, and hunger for recognition within the Lucchese crime family. What began as the story of a skinny kid in a wise guy suit quickly evolved into the legacy of one of the most feared and unpredictable figures in New York's underworld. On the night of the infamous Air France heist, Henry Hill and Tommy DeSimone embarked on a mission that would later be remembered as one of the most brazen thefts in organized crime history. Their plan was simple yet daring. Armed with nothing but an empty suitcase, the largest Hill could find, They drove to Kennedy Airport under the cover of darkness. At precisely 11:40 p.m., the two men strolled into the Air France cargo terminal, appearing no different from ordinary travelers searching for misplaced luggage. This unassuming approach was inspired by McMahon, an inside contact, who assured them that casual entry would arouse no suspicion. Once inside, the duo moved with calculated precision. The area was unsecured, and with a duplicate key in hand, they unlocked the door to their prize. Illuminated only by the soft glow of a small flashlight, Hill and DeSimone located 7 cash-laden bags. Each one was packed with untraceable currency, and in a matter of minutes, they loaded them into the suitcase and casually walked away. No alarms sounded, no guards intervened, not a single shot was fired. By the end of the night, they had successfully stolen $420,000. It wasn't until Monday, when a Wells Fargo truck arrived to collect the funds for delivery to the French-American Banking Corporation, that anyone realized the money was gone. By then, Hill and DeSimone had vanished without a trace. But Hill's life of crime didn't end there. After his release from prison in 1970, he found himself in the middle of another notorious event, vividly described in the Mafia memoir Wise Guy. The scene was set at Robert's Lounge, a nightclub owned by Jimmy Burke. The occasion? A welcome home party for William Billy Bats Bentvena, a man whose offhanded remark would seal his fate. Bentvena, perhaps not knowing the danger he was in, jokingly asked DeSimone, "You still shining shoes?" What may have been intended as playful ribbing was taken as a deep insult by DeSimone. Leaning toward Hill and Burke, he seethed, "I'm gonna kill that expletive." 2 weeks later, on June 11, 1970, DeSimone's grudge reached a boiling point. The trio, Hill, DeSimone, and Burke, were gathered at the Suite, Hill's nightclub in Queens. The club was nearly empty, and Bentvena was caught off guard. Without warning, DeSimone struck, pistol whipping Bentvena with brutal force. "Shine these fucking shoes!" he shouted, delivering blow after blow until Bentvena was battered and bloodied. Believing him to be dead, the men placed his body in the trunk of Hill's car. But as they drove to dispose of the body, they heard the unmistakable thumping of Bentvena still alive. Without hesitation, they pulled over. Armed with a shovel and a tire iron, DeSimone and Burke finished the grisly task. Later, with the help of a friend who owned a dog kennel in upstate New York, they buried Bentvena's body on the property, ensuring it would remain undiscovered for years. These events, marked by cool calculation and bursts of savage violence, highlight the stark realities of life in the mob. It was a world where even a perceived insult could spark deadly retribution, and where audacious heists were planned as casually as an evening out. About 3 months after Bentvena's murder, Burke's friend sold the dog kennel to housing developers, and Burke ordered Hill and DeSimone to exhume Bentvena's corpse and dispose of it elsewhere. In Wise Guy, Hill said the body was eventually crushed in a compactor at a New Jersey junkyard which was owned by Clyde Brooks. However, on the commentary for the film Goodfellas, he states that Bentvena's body was buried in the basement of Robert's Lounge, and that it was only later put in the compactor. DeSimone's third murder, described by Hill, was of a young man named Michael Spider Gianco, who was serving as a bartender at a card game. Gianco and DeSimone had an argument after Gianco forgot DeSimone's drink. That resulted in DeSimone pulling out a handgun and shooting him in the thigh. A week later, when Gianco was again serving drinks and sporting a full leg cast, DeSimone started to goad him about his wounded leg, spurring Gianco to tell DeSimone to go fuck himself. After a stunned silence, an impressed Burke, having now developed a respect for Gianco for sticking up for himself, gave him some money before jokingly teasing DeSimone, who hadn't said or done anything in retaliation, about going soft. DeSimone lost his temper and fatally shot Gianco 3 times in the chest, angrily demanding of Burke if that was good enough for him. Burke, furious with DeSimone, made him bury Gianco's body in the cellar by himself. According to Hill, witnessing this particular incident left him absolutely certain that DeSimone was a dangerous psychopath with no regard for human life. The events surrounding Gianco's disappearance only added to this belief. While Gianco's body was never found at the original scene of the incident, Hill later revealed on the Howard Stern show that Gianco had been buried near Robert's Lounge, a location that, according to Hill, served as a covert burial ground for several other bodies linked to the crew's criminal activities. This chilling revelation hinted at the extent of the group's violent operations and the hidden horrors buried beneath the surface of their criminal empire. DeSimone's violent tendencies were further demonstrated in what Hill described as his fourth murder. This killing occurred during what was supposed to be a simple intimidation job. DeSimone and fellow associate Stanley Diamond had been tasked with roughing up a warehouse foreman who had refused to cooperate with Burke after a truck heist. The foreman had taken a bold stance, refusing to allow Burke's crew to unload stolen cargo at his warehouse because they lacked union cards. Burke initially attempted to resolve the matter diplomatically, but the foreman's refusal only fueled his frustration. In response, he dispatched DeSimone and Diamond to the foreman's rural New Jersey home to apply pressure and ensure future compliance. Fueled by anger from the long drive and their natural volatility, DeSimone and Diamond's aggression spiraled out of control. What began as a routine intimidation escalated into a deadly assault, and they ended up beating the foreman to death in a fit of rage. The murder underscored DeSimone's unpredictability and lack of restraint, even in situations that did not call for lethal force. The fifth murder attributed to DeSimone was one of the most personal and consequential. This time, the target was his close friend, Dominic Remo Cersani, a man DeSimone had known and trusted. But trust had its limits in the underworld. Suspicion began to build when Burke received information from contacts within the Queens District Attorney's office, revealing that Cersani had been cooperating with the NYPD as an informant. Knowing that betrayal in their world was punishable by death, Burke wasted no time in deciding Cersani's fate. To carry out the execution, Burke enlisted DeSimone. Together, they lured Cersani to Robert's lounge under the guise of taking a ride together. Once inside the car, DeSimone turned on his friend with brutal efficiency, using a piano wire to strangle him. Hill later recounted in Wise Guy how Cersani fought desperately for his life, kicking, struggling, and even losing control of his bodily functions before finally succumbing to death. It was a grim reminder of the ruthlessness that governed life and death in the world of organized crime. As with previous murders, Cersani's body was buried behind Robert's lounge near the Bocce Court, further cementing the location's grim reputation as a hidden graveyard for those who crossed the wrong people. This sequence of murders revealed DeSimone's descent into unchecked violence, his role as a trusted enforcer, and the cold-blooded efficiency with which Burke's orders were carried out. It also exposed the inner workings of a criminal empire where loyalty was demanded, betrayal was met with death, and friendships were as fragile as the next police investigation. On December 18, 1974, DeSimone killed Ronald Giroth, a protege of then Gambino associate John Gotti. DeSimone had dated Giroth's sister and had beaten her up, prompting Giroth to threaten to kill him. When DeSimone heard about the threat, he went to Giroth's apartment and killed him. On December 11, 1978, an estimated $5.875 million, equivalent to $27.4 million in 2023, was stolen from the Lufthansa cargo terminal at Kennedy Airport, with $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, making it the largest cash robbery committed on U.S. soil at the time. Burke decided on DeSimone, McMahon, Angelo Sipe, Louis Cafora, Joe Manry, and Paolo Lacastri as the robbers. Burke's son Frank would drive one of the backup vehicles while Parnell Stax Edwards, a musician and career criminal, was given the task of disposing of the getaway van afterwards. After the heist, Edwards was instructed to drive the vehicle to New Jersey, where it, along with any potential evidence inside, was to be destroyed in a junkyard belonging to Gotti. Instead, Edwards parked the van in front of a fire hydrant at his girlfriend's apartment, where police discovered it 2 days after the heist. The plates were stolen and the police impounded the van. They soon found Stax's fingerprints and connected it to the robbery. Vario subsequently ordered DeSimone to kill Edwards. Once he found out where Edwards was hiding, DeSimone and Sepe visited Edwards and shot him 5 times in the head. On January 14, 1979, Angela DeSimone reported her husband, Thomas DeSimone, missing. She stated that she had last seen him a few weeks earlier when he borrowed $60 from her. His disappearance sparked numerous theories, with the most prominent being that DeSimone was murdered as retaliation for the unsanctioned killings of 2 men associated with John Gotti, William Billy Bats Bentvena and Ronald Foxy Giroth. When Henry Hill became an FBI informant in 1980, he claimed that DeSimone had been murdered by the Gambino crime family. Despite January 14, 1979, often being cited as the date of his death, the exact timing remains unclear. Hill later revealed that in the week following Christmas 1978, he and Jimmy Burke had traveled to Florida to settle a drug deal gone wrong. DeSimone, however, stayed in New York after being led to believe he was about to be made, a prestigious promotion within the Mafia. It was then that Peter Vario, son of Paul Vario, and Bruno Facciolo allegedly lured him to an undisclosed location where he was killed. Hill also suggested that DeSimone had already been murdered by January 6, 1979, the day that another associate, Martin Krugman, vanished. Theories regarding DeSimone's death differ, with various mob insiders offering conflicting versions of events. Mob informant Joseph "Joe Dogs" Iannuzzi claimed that Thomas Agro, a Gambino associate, boasted about killing DeSimone as well as his brother, Anthony DeSimone, after he turned informant. Agro reportedly joked about completing the DeSimone trifecta by killing the last surviving brother, Robert DeSimone. Another version comes from Hill himself. In his book Gangsters and Goodfellas, Hill claimed that John Gotti was DeSimone's killer, with Agro present at the scene. Hill also suggested that Gotti, being a close friend of Billy Batts, wanted DeSimone to suffer before he died. On The Howard Stern Show in 2007, Hill reaffirmed that Gotti was responsible for DeSimone's death, adding that the process was drawn out to ensure he endured pain. However, in the Lufthansa Heist, 2015, co-written by Hill and journalist Daniel Simone, it is stated that DeSimone's death was instant, resulting from 3 gunshots to the head. Yet another account comes from Sal Polisi, a former mobster who claimed that Agro, with Gotti present, tortured DeSimone to death slowly. These conflicting stories have only deepened the mystery surrounding DeSimone's fate. Some theorists believe that DeSimone's body may be buried in The Hole, an infamous Mafia burial ground located on the Brooklyn-Queens border near Kennedy Airport. This site was where the body of Al Indelicato was discovered in 1981, and in 2004, the remains of Philip Giacconi and Dominic Trinchera were also unearthed in the area. To this day, DeSimone's final resting place remains unknown, and the exact details of his death continue to fuel speculation and intrigue in both mob history and popular culture. On January 14, 1979, Angela DeSimone reported her husband, Thomas DeSimone, missing. She stated that she had last seen him a few weeks earlier when he borrowed $60 from her. His disappearance sparked numerous theories, with the most prominent being that DeSimone was murdered as retaliation for the unsanctioned killings of 2 men associated with John Gotti, William "Billy" Batts Bentvena, and Ronald "Foxy" Giroth. When Henry Hill became an FBI informant in 1980, he claimed that DeSimone had been murdered by the Gambino crime family. Despite January 14, 1979, often being cited as the date of his death, the exact timing remains unclear. Hill later revealed that in the week following Christmas 1978, he and Jimmy Burke had traveled to Florida to settle a drug deal gone wrong. DeSimone, however, stayed in New York after being led to believe he was about to be made, a prestigious promotion within the Mafia. It was then that Peter Vario, son of Paul Vario, and Bruno Facciolo allegedly lured him to an undisclosed location where he was killed. Hill also suggested that DeSimone had already been murdered by January 6, 1979, the day that another associate, Martin Krugman, vanished. Theories regarding DeSimone's death differ, with various mob insiders offering conflicting versions of events. Mob informant Joseph "Joe Dogs" Iannuzzi claimed that Thomas Agro, a Gambino associate, boasted about killing DeSimone as well as his brother, Anthony DeSimone, after he turned informant. Agro reportedly joked about completing the DeSimone trifecta by killing the last surviving brother, Robert DeSimone. Another version comes from Hill himself. In his book Gangsters and Goodfellas, Hill claimed that John Gotti was DeSimone's killer, with Agro present at the scene. Hill also suggested that Gotti, being a close friend of Billy Batts, wanted DeSimone to suffer before he died. On The Howard Stern Show in 2007, Hill reaffirmed that Gotti was responsible for DeSimone's death, adding that the process was drawn out to ensure he endured pain. However, in the Lufthansa Heist, 2015, co-written by Hill and journalist Daniel Simone, it is stated that DeSimone's death was instant, resulting from 3 gunshots to the head. Yet another account comes from Sal Polisi, a former mobster who claimed that Agro, with Gotti present, tortured DeSimone to death slowly. These conflicting stories have only deepened the mystery surrounding DeSimone's fate. Some theorists believe that DeSimone's body may be buried in The Hole, an infamous Mafia burial ground located on the Brooklyn-Queens border near Kennedy Airport. This site was where the body of Al Indelicato was discovered in 1981, And in 2004, the remains of Philip Giaccone and Dominic Trinchera were also unearthed in the area. To this day, DeSimone's final resting place remains unknown, and the exact details of his death continue to fuel speculation and intrigue in both mob history and popular culture. DeSimone's legacy is largely shaped by his actions as a violent enforcer for the Mafia. He was known for carrying out ruthless killings, and his boldness and unpredictable nature made him both feared and respected. One of his most infamous moments was his involvement in the murder of a man named Billy Batts, which was central to the plot of Goodfellas. DeSimone was known to have killed with little regard for the consequences, often targeting those who had crossed the Mafia or acted out of line. His impact on the Mafia was significant, as he became a symbol of the brutal enforcer archetype, a man who didn't hesitate to do whatever was necessary to protect the family's interests. DeSimone's life, however, ended tragically in 1979, when he was murdered by members of his own crew. His brutal and violent nature caught up with him, and his legacy remains one of danger, loyalty, and the inevitable downfall that many Mafia figures faced. Though his criminal career was short-lived, DeSimone's impact on Mafia culture, particularly in how the violent side of the organization functioned, was considerable. He left a lasting mark on both the criminal world and popular culture, where his story continues to be a cautionary tale about the high costs of a life in organized crime.